Welcome, wanderers of the night, to our realm of shadows. Tonight, let the soothing whisper of the dark surround you as the real world fades away. We are about to venture far beyond the reach of daylight, to a forsaken sanctuary in the deep waters of Malaysia. Known only as Skull Island, a land forbidden to the living, cloaked in breathtaking beauty, yet reeking of ancient curses and eternal slumber. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let yourself sink deep into the chilling tale. Good night, and may your dreams find safe passage through the dark. The sea off the coast of Malaysia in mid-July lay as flat and motionless as a giant black mirror. The small rented speedboat sliced through the waves, carrying the four friends far beyond the boundaries of standard tourist routes. In the distance, rising through a thin shroud of mist hovering over the water, the island revealed an unsettling, grotesque silhouette. Two sheer limestone karsts were hollowed out by deep, shadowy caverns, bearing an uncanny resemblance to the empty eye sockets of a colossal human skull half submerged in the ocean. The locals only spoke of this place in hushed, terrified whispers, the forbidden land. Yet, fueled by restless youth and reckless curiosity, Ethan, Leo, Chloe, and Maya dismissed the warnings as mere folklore. The moment the hull grounded upon the pristine white sand, an unnatural heaviness seized their chests. The island possessed a haunting, ethereal beauty. Lush emerald rainforests framed the turquoise coastline, and ancient banyan canopies blocked out the scorching summer sun. However, the surroundings were engulfed in a total, suffocating silence. There was no sound of birds calling from the treetops, no drone of cicadas cutting through the summer heat. Even beneath the crystal-clear water along the shoreline, there were no darting fish, no crabs, and not a single trace of aquatic life. It was a realm of absolute death cloaked beneath the facade of paradise. Venture deeper into the shaded valley. The group stumbled upon a cluster of magnificent colonial-era villas abandoned decades ago. Thick moss and creeping vines strangled the once grand marble walls. The front doors of the largest estate hung wide open, revealing a pitch-black interior that radiated a bone-chilling draft, a stark, unnatural contrast to the sweltering tropical heat outside. The group decided to set up camp inside the expansive, rotting living room to spend the night. Darkness swallowed the island with terrifying swiftness. With no moonlight piercing through the canopy, the only sound was the wind howling through fractured window panes, mimicking the distant, mournful wailing of wandering souls. Around 2 in the morning, the indoor temperature plunged so drastically that their breath condensed into pale white mist. Maya woke up with a sharp, pressing urge to relieve herself. The room was deathly quiet, save for the rhythmic breathing of her 3 sleeping companions. She switched on her phone's flashlight. The feeble beam illuminated only a faint circle on the dust-laden floor. Maya crept out into the endless, shadowy corridor toward the restroom located at the far end of the hallway. Every step upon the rotten floorboards produced a sharp, piercing creak that echoed violently in her ears. As she passed a massive, web-covered mirror fractured across the middle, the flashlight beam swept across the glass. Maya froze, her heart hammered violently against her ribs. Reflected in the glass behind her was not an empty corridor, but a tall, emaciated black figure standing entirely motionless. Its head unnaturally snapped sideways at a sharp 90-degree angle. The pungent stench of rotting flesh and stagnant mud flooded her senses. Before Maya could even draw breath to scream, an icy whisper brushed against the shell of her ear. "You have set foot upon the soil of the dead." The ghostly whisper seeped directly into every nerve, paralyzing Maya's entire body. The icy draft exhaled onto the back of her neck carried no warmth of a living being. It reeked intensely of stagnant trench mud and long decayed flesh. Maya desperately wanted to scream at the top of her lungs to awaken Ethan, Leo, and Chloe, but her throat constricted tightly, as though a rough, invisible hand were crushing her windpipe. Her legs felt impossibly heavy, rooted firmly to the damp, rotting timber floorboards. In the dim, flickering glow of her struggling phone flashlight, the black silhouette reflected in the mirror began to move. It did not turn around naturally. Each vertebra along its spine contorted with dry, sickening cracks that grated on the soul. The sideways tilted head slowly twisted a full 180 degrees toward the rear. revealing an ashen, eyeless face, possessing only two hollow, cavernous sockets leaking a thick, tar-like black fluid. A violent shudder shattered Maya's paralysis. Survival instinct surging, she dropped her phone onto the floor and bolted in sheer terror toward the living room. The desperate pounding of her footsteps on the brittle wood mingled with her frantic, ragged breathing, tearing through the suffocating silence of the night. Yet right behind her, the heavy, dragging sound of something drenched pursued in close chase, accompanied by the screech of sharp claws gouging long grooves into the crumbling plaster walls. Maya slammed hard into the living room doorway, collapsing to the floor and screaming in unbridled despair, "Help me! There's something out there!" The campsite lanterns immediately flared to life, piercing through the dense darkness. Ethan sprang up first, gripping his camping machete tightly. Leo hurriedly grabbed his handheld video camera, while Chloe rushed forward to support Maya. Maya's entire frame trembled violently, her teeth chattering with sharp clicks. Her skin dead pale and as cold as glacial ice. "Calm down, Maya, what happened?" Ethan demanded, his gaze locked intensely on the pitch-black corridor beyond the door. Maya pointed toward the hallway with wide, frantic eyes, utterly speechless. Leo aimed the powerful LED light mounted on his camera into the void. The hallway was completely empty. No one was there, however. Across the thick carpet of dust on the tiles, there was a long, dragging streak of dark black slime, emitting a suffocating, nauseating stench of decay. The trail stretched all the way from the fractured mirror, stopping right at the threshold where the four of them stood. Chloe knelt down to examine the dark residue, the color draining entirely from her face. "This isn't a human trail, nor an animal's. This place, we should never have set foot here in the first place." Leo looked down at his camera viewfinder, his hands suddenly trembling. The thermal overlay on the screen showed the corridor temperature at -5 degrees Celsius. Despite the stifling tropical summer night outside. Even more horrifying, as Leo rewound the continuous footage recorded moments earlier, harsh static tore across the display. Amidst the visual artifacts, a faint, translucent figure with a grotesque, snapped neck stood hovering directly behind Maya the second she stepped out into the hall. Without warning, a thunderous crash reverberated from the villa's main entrance. All the massive wooden doors slammed shut simultaneously as if yanked by an immense invisible force. The heavy iron latch bolts slid into place on their own with sharp, metallic thuds. The beam of their flashlights began to flicker erratically. From the high, rotting, moss-covered ceiling above, droplets of black fluid began to drip down one by one, hissing softly as they struck the dying embers of their campfire, sending up a ghostly plume of violet smoke and an unbearable stench. Upstairs on the abandoned second floor, the sound of bare footsteps began to pace, step by step, slow and deliberate, circling directly above the heads of the four trapped souls. The bare footsteps on the second floor no longer paced at a slow, deliberate crawl. They accelerated rapidly into frantic, heavy sprints, thumping violently across the fragile wooden floorboards. The frenzied cadence circled the perimeter of the ceiling before halting abruptly dead in the center, directly above the heads of the four terrified youths. Plaster dust and crumbling debris rained down onto their hair and shoulders. A suffocating, deathly stillness descended once more, so heavy they could clearly hear their own hearts pounding against their ribs like trapped animals. Suddenly, from the abyssal darkness of the upper floor, the sound of a vintage piano echoed down. The melody was disjointed, warped, and painfully off-key. Heavy, dissonant chords resonated through the cavernous corridors like agonized wails rising from the grave. Mingling with the ghastly music were the muffled murmurs of dozens of layered voices, the shrill, hollow giggles of women, and the sharp clinking of crystal glasses. The spectral sounds of a lavish colonial banquet were unfolding with terrifying vividness inside this rotting ruin. What the hell is happening up there?" Leo whispered, his throat bone dry. The camera in his trembling hand swayed erratically, pointed directly at the spiral wooden staircase leading upward. "We need to get out to the beach right now. This house is a death trap." Ethan hissed through gritted teeth, pulling Chloe and Maya to their feet. He lunged toward the main entrance, pulling on the heavy iron latch with all his strength. But the iron bolt felt welded into the frame by an unnatural, unseen force, even when Ethan and Leo slammed their full body weight against it. The thick hardwood door remained as immovable as solid granite. "The windows! Smash the windows!" Chloe cried out in mounting panic, pointing toward the large glass panes overlooking the overgrown courtyard. Leo raised his metal baseball bat and swung with everything he had against the glass. A sharp, metallic clang rang out, vibrating like struck armor plate. The dust-caked pane did not suffer even a hairline fracture. Instead, the violent recoil numbed Leo's arms, knocking the bat clattering across the floor. Outside the unbroken glass, dense, gray fog began to churn violently against the panes. Through the shifting mist, dozens of pale, waterlogged faces with hollow, pitch-black eyes pressed tightly against the exterior surface. They stared unblinkingly into the living room, their torn lips stretching inhumanly wide from ear to ear in grotesque, frozen rictus grins, motionless like drowned wax mannequins. Maya collapsed onto the floor, clutching her head and mumbling in sheer hysteria, "They won't let us leave. They want to keep us as an offering for the island." At that exact moment, the piano music upstairs ceased with a deafening, discordant crash that sliced through their ears. The festive murmurs of the phantom banquet died instantly into chilling silence. From the top of the darkened spiral staircase, the rotten wood groaned under deliberate, heavy pressure. A figure was descending. It was a woman clad in a vintage white evening gown, yellowed, frayed to shreds, and caked in foul black silt. The tattered train dragged heavily across each step, exposing bare, bloated, purplish feet that had clearly soaked in deep water for decades. The woman tilted her head upward, beneath strands of matted, dripping hair covering half her face. One of her cheeks had rotted away completely, exposing the stark white bone of her jaw. Her blackened lips parted, spewing forth a swarm of buzzing carrion flies that scattered into the freezing air. She raised an emaciated, gray arm, pointing a skeletal finger straight at the four outsiders. Her voice scraped past razor-sharp teeth like rusty iron. "Tonight, one of you shall take my place in the depths." The foul, suffocating stench of decaying flesh emanating from the woman in the white gown turned the trapped air thick and unbreathable. The swarm of carrion flies whipped into a frenzied cloud, darting at their faces like airborne needles. Ethan slashed the camping machete wildly to scatter the insects, hauling the group backward against the cold stone wall. The specter no longer descended the staircase step by step. Her body hovered, drifting forward through the air like a weightless corpse suspended beneath deep ocean currents. Her empty sockets locked squarely onto Chloe. Parting her torn, cavernous jaws, she released a piercing screech that felt like iron talons dragging across a sheet of metal. Without warning, the rotting floorboards beneath their feet buckled violently. The fractured timber gave way entirely, exposing a gaping, bottomless abyss right in the center of the living room. Before anyone could react, Ethan, Leo, Chloe, and Maya plunged into the void, their screams swallowed by the pitch-black drop. Crash! The brutal impact against damp earth knocked the breath out of their lungs. Ethan's flashlight rolled several meters away, its beams still cutting through the gloom to illuminate a vast, suffocating subterranean chamber buried deep within the island. The air down here was frigid, thick with the heavy copper stench of blood and the pungent aroma of ancient incense. Leo scrambled to his feet, retrieving his cracked handheld camera. As he swept the lens across the chamber, the illumination revealed jagged rock walls carved with hundreds of bizarre, crimson occult symbols. In the center of the cavern sat a circular stone altar, ringed completely by hundreds of human skulls meticulously stacked into macabre tiers. "This is a sacrificial chamber," Chloe whispered, trembling violently as her fingertips brushed against an ash-gray skull. "It's no accident there are no animals on this island. Every living soul that steps foot here is fed to this cursed ground." At that exact moment, low, rhythmic chanting in a guttural, archaic tongue began echoing from the dark recesses of the cavern. Dozens of shadowy figures clad in rotting ceremonial shrouds stepped forward from the rock crevices. Their faces were desiccated, parchment-like skin stretched over bone, with bleeding, hollow eye sockets matching the phantom from the floor above. Maya shrank behind Ethan, her voice fracturing. "They're the ones who used to live here. They're trapped forever." The largest silhouette, clutching a jagged ritual dagger carved from black obsidian, marched directly toward Chloe. The chanting rose in a deafening crescendo, hammering their eardrums until their skulls throbbed with unbearable agony. Chloe collapsed to her knees, her vision blurring as ribbons of black, spectral mist wrapped around her limbs, hoisting her helpless body into midair toward the bloody stone altar. "Chloe!" Ethan roared, gripping the machete with white knuckles and charging straight at the shadowy priest. Ethan lunged forward, swinging the razor-sharp machete horizontally across the shadowy priest's chest. Yet the heavy steel blade merely passed through a cloud of freezing, dense black vapor without inflicting any physical damage. The unresisted force of the swing threw Ethan off balance, sending him crashing hard against the jagged gravel. A bone-piercing frost surged from the vapor into his knuckles, instantly coating the metal blade in a brittle layer of white frost and sending it clattering uselessly across the ground. The priest did not break stride. He slowly turned his withered, eyeless face toward Ethan, his cracked, blackened lips parted, muttering a rapid sequence of archaic incantations that caused the cavern itself to vibrate. The deep crimson symbols carved into the stone walls flared brightly like pulsing veins of boiling blood, casting a sickening reddish luminescence across the subterranean tomb. Suspended above the circular altar, Chloe's body remained paralyzed midair. The churning black mist tightened around her limbs, stretching her outward like a tortured mannequin. Chloe struggled desperately, her eyes wide with terror as dark, blackened veins bulged visibly beneath the pale skin of her neck and face. She gasped for air, but only choked. Rasping wheezes escaped her crushed throat. "The flare! Leo! Use the emergency flare in the pack!" Maya screamed, spotting Ethan's survival kit lying inches from her feet. Snapping out of his shock, Leo dropped the camera and lunged for the waterproof pack. He yanked out a red emergency distress flare, tearing away the safety cap. Leo aimed the tube squarely at the sacrificial altar and struck the igniter. Effetst! A deafening pop accompanied a blinding flare of magnesium burning at thousands of degrees. The projectile slammed into the center of the altar, detonating into a brilliant crimson inferno that instantly tore through the spectral gloom. The searing light and intense thermal energy proved toxic to the unholy apparitions. Piercing, agonizing shrieks erupted in unison from dozens of shadowed phantoms. The black tendrils strangling Chloe dissolved like mist hitting raw fire, dropping her limp body onto the cold stone slab. The towering priest threw up two skeletal arms to shield his face, recoiling as his rotting ceremonial shroud began to smolder violently. "Run! There's an opening on the other side!" Maya yelled as the flare's brilliance illuminated a natural fracture in the cavern wall behind the altar, from which a faint ocean draft drifted. Fighting through the numbness in his frozen arm, Ethan pushed himself up, sprinted to the altar, and hoisted Chloe onto his shoulder. Leo grabbed the high-powered lantern, guarding the rear alongside Maya, channeling their remaining adrenaline. The four bolted directly into the narrow crevice. The moment their boots crossed into the underground fissure, the emergency flare sputtered out behind them. Absolute pitch black swallowed the cavern once more. Behind them, the dry snapping of contorting bones and the thunderous patter of hundreds of bare feet sprinting across bare stone gave chase with terrifying speed. The underground tunnel narrowed with every frantic stride of the fleeing group. The low, jagged ceiling bristled with razor-sharp stalactites pointing downward like the fangs of a leviathan. The subterranean air was thick and humid, a nauseating cocktail of briny ocean salt and rotting flesh. Beneath their boots lay no ordinary earth, but countless fragmented bones that pulverized with sickening crunches beneath their weight. Chloe began to stir over Ethan's shoulder. Her frame shuddered violently, her weak, icy breath brushing against his neck. "Ethan, put me down. They aren't chasing to kill us, they are herding us into its mouth." "Stop talking nonsense, Chloe. Just hold on," Ethan panted, his calf muscles burning to the brink of tearing as he hauled his friend across the treacherous, uneven terrain. Behind them, Leo whipped his lantern beam backward into the abyss. The grotesque entities were no longer sprinting on two legs. They scuttled across the craggy walls and ceiling on twisted, hyper-extended limbs like monstrous arachnids. Their bleeding eye sockets leaked fresh crimson down pale jaws, their razor claws carving sparks from the stone accompanied by ear-splitting shrieks. The gap between predator and prey shrank with every passing second. "Move faster. They're right behind us," Maya screamed frantically, shielding Chloe's trailing legs with her own body. Abruptly, the tunnel expanded into a colossal subterranean cavern. But before them lay no direct path to the shoreline. Instead, an unfathomable, pitch-black chasm cut across their path. Far below in the abyss, violent ocean swells slammed against submerged reefs, sending up frothing white spray mingled with the deep, guttural rumble of something colossal stirring beneath the black tide. An ancient rope suspension bridge, its wooden slats largely rotted away into decayed splinters, swayed precariously across the gulf toward an opening on the opposing wall, where the pale, silver glow of the night moon filtered through a natural fissure. "This bridge won't hold all four of us at once," Leo cried in horror, staring at the frayed hemp ropes creaking in the violent upwelling winds. "We have no choice. One by one. Move now." Ethan set Chloe down, nudging her toward the bridgehead. "Maya, go first and pull Chloe across." Maya bit her lip hard, gripping Chloe's trembling, ice-cold hand as they gingerly stepped onto the rotten planks. The bridge swung violently over the abyss, ancient timber groaning under their weight. Just as Maya and Chloe reached the midway mark, a heavy mass plummeted from the darkened ceiling above Ethan and Leo, slamming onto the stone floor to block their retreat. It was the woman in the shredded white gown. Her anatomy had twisted beyond recognition. Her limbs were unnaturally elongated. Her broken neck dangled uselessly to one side, and from her torn, hollow chest cavity, dozens of purplish infant arms writhed outward, clawing aggressively toward the two young men. The woman in the tattered white dress shrieked with a horrific, shrill laughter that bounced off the cavern walls like metal grinding on metal. The dozens of bruised, purplish infant arms protruding from her crushed ribcage stretched unnaturally long, their razor-sharp claws flailing aggressively through the freezing air. The nauseating stench of stagnant blood and swamp mud hit Ethan and Leo squarely in the face. "Leo, jump onto the bridge now," Ethan roared, grabbing a sharp, rotting stake from the ground and lunging directly at the abomination. The timber pierced through her chest, erupting with a thick, hissing jet of corrosive black fluid. The thrust did not destroy the malevolent entity, but it forced her backward several steps, clearing a narrow opening. Without hesitation, Leo bolted onto the first slats of the swinging rope bridge. Ethan turned and sprinted after him. The moment his boots left the stone ledge, the specter lunged forward with terrifying speed, an icy, discolored arm wrapping around Ethan's ankle and violently yanking him backward. Ethan crashed hard, his lower body sliding off the edge of the bridge, dangling precariously above the bottomless black abyss. The violent roar of ocean breakers far below sounded like the gaping maw of death waiting to swallow its prey whole. "Ethan!" Leo whipped around, flattening himself against the rotting planks and locking both hands around Ethan's wrist with every ounce of strength he possessed. Freezing claws tore through Ethan's pants and flesh, sending warm blood dripping into the dark void. The searing pain, combined with an unnatural, soul-chilling frost, sent his muscles into violent spasms. Across the chasm, Maya and Chloe had safely set foot on the opposing stone ledge. Seeing Ethan in mortal danger, Chloe seized a sharp rock with both hands and hurled it with desperate precision straight into the entity's face. The projectile struck the hollow eye socket, unleashing a deafening shriek of pain that forced the phantom to loosen its grip. Ethan seized the split-second opening, driving his free boot into the entity's rotting face. The force broke the spectral hold. Leo gritted his teeth, heaving backward and dragging Ethan flat onto the unstable floorboards. However, the ancient structure could no longer withstand the relentless structural stress. The primary support ropes on one flank snapped with violent, sharp cracks. The entire walkway tilted abruptly at a terrifying 45-degree angle. "Run! It's collapsing!" Ethan shouted. The two scrambled forward on hands and knees, clawing over planks that shattered and plummeted into the void beneath them. Right behind them, dozens of grotesque silhouettes swarmed the cliff's edge, leaping onto the remaining cordage in frantic pursuit. Overwhelmed by the sudden mass, the entire bridge gave way, snapping completely in two. Ethan and Leo launched themselves forward in a desperate leap of faith. They slammed chest first against the opposing rock ledge by mere inches. Maya and Chloe instantly lunged forward, grabbing their jackets and hauling them onto solid stone. Behind them, the wreckage of wood and hemp, along with dozens of twisted apparitions, plunged straight down into the fathomless chasm. From the dark depths below, a colossal roar shook the cavern, accompanied by the sickening sound of wet tearing and ravenous devouring beneath the black waters. Yet before the four survivors, the path leading toward the moonlight offered no salvation. It opened directly into an ancient open-air burial ground nestled within the caldera of Skull Island's extinct volcano. Pale, silver moonlight poured into the colossal basin of the extinct volcanic caldera, draping the surroundings in a sickly white sheen reminiscent of a burial shroud. All around the four survivors, hundreds of ancient black stone graves stood solitary amidst withered, thorny brush. The tombstones bore no names. Only dense clusters of skull sigils crossed out with crimson pigments that looked disturbingly wet, as though the blood had yet to dry. The air here hung unnaturally dense and freezing, far colder than anywhere else on the island. Every breath exhaled by the group formed thick plumes of white vapor. The wounds on Ethan's ankle were turning an ominous shade of purple, delicate black veins spider-webbed outward from the lacerations, sending agony shooting straight into his marrow with every step. "We can't stop here," Ethan gritted his teeth, leaning heavily on Leo's shoulder to keep moving forward. "We have to find a route up the crater rim to get down to the coastline." "Look over there." Maya froze, her trembling finger pointing toward the epicenter of the burial grounds. In the dead center of the barren graveyard stood a colossal, leafless tree stretching its gnarled, skeletal bumper into the night sky like demonic claws. Horrifyingly, suspended from the thickest branches were dozens of crude nooses woven entirely from human hair. Dangling beneath each rope was a mummified corpse, swaying with rhythmic creaks in the freezing drafts that whipped across the caldera floor. Chloe clutched her chest, staring unblinkingly at the ancient tree. They didn't die of old age or sickness. This is where every single soul on this island ended their own lives on a full moon many years ago. They hanged themselves to surrender their souls to the entity that rules this place. Without warning, the wind died entirely. Absolute, suffocating silence swallowed the caldera. Kriak, kriak. Despite the lack of breeze, the hanged corpses began to sway in violent synchronicity. The desiccated skulls tilted backward in unison, locking their empty sockets directly onto the four intruders. Their dried jawbones clattered together in rapid, sickening clicks. From beneath the black stone graves surrounding them, the earth fractured open. Skeletal, rotting arms punched through the damp soil, clawing frantically through gravel to drag themselves upward into the open air. The strangled, collective wheezes of hundreds of soulless dead mingled into a mournful dirge of absolute malice, completely severing the only path forward. Leo took a panicked step backward, his trembling lantern beam exposing the tightening ring of horrors. "We're boxed in. There's no way up the crater walls." A withered arm burst through the ground directly beneath Ethan, locking onto his remaining good ankle and violently dragging him down onto the frozen stone. The sudden yank slammed Ethan's jaw hard into the jagged gravel, sending the metallic taste of warm blood flooding into his mouth. The withered hand underground clamped shut like a rusted iron shackle. Filthy black talons dug deep into his flesh, dragging his body inexorably toward the collapsing sinkhole. "Ethan!" Leo screamed in sheer horror, swinging the baseball bat with full force to shatter the skeletal arm into brittle fragments. Maya and Chloe rushed in instantly, gripping Ethan's forearms and hauling him backward with desperate strength. Mournful, guttural wails rose relentlessly from deep within the earth as dozens more desiccated hands punched through the surrounding burial mounds, clawing frantically through the freezing air as if trying to tear the night apart. High in the barren branches of the great tree, the nooses woven from human hair stretched taut with sickening, high-pitched creaks. Dozens of mummified corpses dropped in unison to the ground. They did not collapse, instead. They stood bolt upright on hyper-extended, twitching joints. Their heads lolled unnaturally to one side. Empty eye sockets weeping streams of foul black fluid that glowed with a ghostly, phosphorescent sheen beneath the moonlight. The hanged dead parted their jaws. From hollow, tongue-less throats, an ancient lullaby emerged in shrill, trembling, agonized tones. The spectral song struck the minds of the four survivors like an invisible psychic shockwave. Chloe clutched her temples, collapsing to her knees and dry heaving violently. The veins across her forehead bulged to the point of bursting. The song, it's seizing our minds. Don't listen, please don't listen. Leo's entire body went rigid, his eyes glazing over into a vacant, milky stare. His feet began moving in slow, rhythmic strides toward the colossal tree, where an empty hair noose descended slowly through the branches, dangling directly at neck level. Leo, stop, Leo. Maya tackled him around the waist, throwing her full body weight backward to restrain him. Yet Leo possessed unnatural, borrowed strength, continuing his deliberate march like a possessed automaton. Fighting through the blinding agony in both mangled legs, Ethan whipped out a metal stormproof lighter from his breast pocket. He seized a torn rag soaked in camping fuel from his battered pack, ignited it, and hurled the blazing torch straight into the bed of withered thorn bushes beneath the advancing corpses. Whoosh! A violent wall of fire erupted instantly, consuming the dry brush and creating a blazing perimeter between the survivors and the horde of hanged specters. The suffocating stench of charred rot and burning human hair choked the air, burning their throats with every desperate breath. Piercing shrieks ripped from the undead as flames engulfed their withered husks, instantly shattering the psychic trance of the cursed lullaby. Leo snapped out of the stupor with a violent gasp, staring in sheer terror at the hair noose hanging mere inches from his throat. This way. The cliff behind the great tree has a fissure leading upward, Chloe shouted as the firelight illuminated a narrow, precarious goat trail hugging the sheer wall of the caldera. Without daring to look back, the four scrambled over burning ash and splintered bone, bolting for their lives toward the vertical rock face amidst the churning black smoke. Fan 10. Bacha da tai wang. Con duong mon men theo suen meng nui lua hep den naget tho. Kai vua van mo ban chan bam bao go da tron truit. Geo bien thok tu vuch sao len tung con du doi. Mang theo hoi suong moi rat buat ba tieng gam ruman dai kua song bo de vuch. Phia doi lung ho. Buk tuong lua dang lui tan dan. De lo hang tram bong den dang dien quang leo trio tren bacha da doi theo nu mo dan kien kot mao. Ethan di jua. Tung buok di choyen la mo kuk hin ta du. Bet sao o ko chan da choyen sang mao den kit. Chad dok tam lin gom dan lam mok mao sung fong. Cam jok buok jia te liat lan len tan do goi. Leo di truok dan duong. Te bam chat bao tung hok da non hot ra mao. Maya vok Chloe bok lot fia sao. Hoi tho don dap du quang vi kiet suk. Bong nien. Leo kung lai. An den pin ke qua mo quang trong hoak. Con duong mon bai du don boy mo vet sat lo di hun hai met. Ben doi quang ho la vuch tham dening gom tham tham. Noi nung tang da gom no len nu hang non mui chong chuk cho nian nat con moi. Kong con duong nu aroi. Leo et qua tieng geo rit. Chung ta fi en he qua go da doi din. En he qua du la tu sat. Qua xa. Maya nin zong vuch sao tham tham. Do ak ki quang vi du sao va noi so hai ta kung. Nge quan kak du. Mo ban te zong zao tu mep vuch fia sao von len. Chop lay gao ao kua Chloe. Tieng gam gu tan h tui fa thang vao geko. Bei zak song da doi toi noi. Kon mat ko date kua mo ti the rach nat troi len. Ha hok meng ton kan bao bap chan ko gai. En he mao. Kong con thoi jian do. Ethan gam len. Andung het suk bin sin bung kan rua dap nat hop so kua kai zak dang bam lay Chloe. Leo lay da. Tung noi en he vat qua quang kong tu than. Then noi an dap man vau go da ben kia. Hai te sao zoe bam chat vau vacha nut. Chat vat truon len and tone. An voi va ki lai. Von di hai te. Maya. En he di. Toigiu duok ko. Maya kan chat moi den bat mao. Ko chan fong qua vuch tham. Leo chop lay ko te ko trong gang tak. Ko jiet ko len mom da and tone. Den luot Chloe. Ki ko chuan bai lay da. Mo luong suong den tu de vuch bag go gun zoe thok len. Mang theo hin bong mo ao kua dan ba ve trang. Luke geo ta ak voi bat kian Chloe choi voi na nagua ve fia sao. Ethan bat chap doi chan dang te liat. Lao min toi chop lay te Chloe roy dung quan tin kako the name man ko sang bo ben kia. Leo va maya lap tuk don lay Chloe and tone. Nung Luke fan hoi de Ethan Louis lai mep vuch du gay. Vacha da doi chan an nut toak roy du sup. Tone bo bo vuch fia sao sat lo hon tone. Ethan roy tu du zong meng vuch sao tham. Ethan, tieng gao te tuyet bong kua ka ba noise toak man dem uam. Trong quan kak sin tu. Mo soy de leo ko tu ru zong tu din bacha da ke and gong qua nuk Ethan. An geo gun te con lai chop lay soy de bang ban nong sin tun kuoi kong. Ka the noi an va dap du doi vau bacha da gom. Trio lo lung jua lung chung troi va vuch tham. Nung nga white trend soy de leo fiat trend do an. Hang chuk con red dot mao du tham to bang non te bat do bo ra tu kak ke lamuk. Truon thang zong ban te dang nam chat soy de kua Ethan. Part 10. The Cliff of Disaster. The narrow goat trail tracing the rim of the caldera was suffocatingly thin. Barely offering a foot's breadth on the slick, treacherous shale. Violent updrafts hurled salty ocean spray upward, accompanied by the savage roar of surging breakers crashing against the submerged reefs below. Behind them, the wall of fire was rapidly dying, revealing hundreds of shadowed abominations scuttling up the vertical cliffside like blood-crazed ants. Ethan moved in the center, every single step an agonizing torment. The blackened lacerations around his ankle had worsened considerably. Necrotic spiritual venom swelled his veins, sending a freezing, numbing frost creeping straight to his knee. Leo took point, his raw, bleeding fingertips wedging into razor-sharp fissures. Maya and Chloe anchored the rear, their ragged breathing faltering from total physical exhaustion. Suddenly, Leo froze. His trembling lantern beam washed over a terrifying void. The trail had collapsed, severing the path with a gaping chasm over 2 meters wide. Below the drop lay only fathomless darkness, where jagged sea stacks protruded like thousands of spikes waiting to pulverize falling prey. The path ends here, Leo yelled over the howling gale. We have to jump across to the opposite ledge. That jump is pure suicide. It's too far. Maya stared into the sheer drop, vertigo and primal terror violently spinning her vision. At that exact second, a desiccated arm hooked over the edge behind them, clamping hard onto Chloe's jacket hem. A putrid, rotten hiss brushed the back of her neck. The horde had arrived. The withered, leathery visage of a decaying corpse hauled itself up, snapping its broken jaws directly toward her calf. Jump! There is no time, Ethan roared, with the last reserve of his physical might. He slammed the butt of his machete downward, crushing the skull of the creature clutching Chloe. Leo braced himself and launched his body across the deadly void. He slammed hard against the opposite rock face, his fingers clawing furiously into a jagged crack before hauling himself onto the narrow ledge. He spun around immediately, extending both arms. Maya. Jump, I've got you. Maya bit her lower lip until it bled, crouching low and throwing herself across the abyss. Leo caught her forearms by mere inches, heaving her up onto the solid stone. Next was Chloe. Just as she coiled to jump, a column of swirling black fog erupted from the oceanic chasm below. Manifesting the ethereal silhouette of the woman in white, the unnatural blast of foul wind knocked Chloe off balance, sending her tipping backward. Disregarding his paralyzed legs, Ethan lunged forward, seized Chloe's wrist, and used his entire momentum to whip her across the gap. Leo and Maya tackled Chloe to safety instantly. The recoil, however, drove Ethan backward onto the crumbling cliff edge. The fractured shale beneath his boots pulverized completely. The entire ledge gave way in a violent landslide. Ethan plummeted into the dark void. Ethan, a chorus of frantic, heartbroken shrieks ripped through the night sky. In that razor-thin instant between life and death, an ancient hanging banyan vine dangling from the upper cliffs swept across Ethan's chest. He thrust out his free hand, gripping the vine with raw survival instinct. His body slammed violently against the jagged rock wall, leaving him suspended precariously between the sheer cliff and the bottomless abyss. Yet directly above his white-knuckled grip, dozens of venomous, crimson-striped centipedes the size of human fingers emerged from the decaying moss. Crawling swiftly down toward his clinging hand, the crimson centipedes writhed frantically along the rotting banyan vine, their razor-sharp legs sinking into the decaying bark with sickening, dry rustles. Their elongated antennae twitched relentlessly, locking onto Ethan's white-knuckled fingers. The numbing spiritual paralysis creeping up his legs had reached his hips, combined with the raw terror of the approaching venomous swarm. Every muscle in his body trembled violently. "Ethan, don't let go!" Leo's scream ripped through the howling night wind. Across the shattered ledge, Leo hurriedly stripped off his heavy leather belt, looping and knotting it securely through the reinforced paracord strap of their remaining survival pack. Maya and Chloe anchored the bitter end around a jagged stone outcropping to form a rigid belay point. Leaning his upper body far over the abyssal void, Leo whipped the line, tipped with a heavy metal carabiner, straight toward Ethan. "Grab the clip. Now!" The first centipede breached the back of Ethan's hand, burying its curved pincers deep into his flesh. A searing agony, like glowing hot iron pressed against raw skin, flared through his nerve endings. His fingers spasmed uncontrollably, nearly slipping from the vine. Gritting his teeth until blood welled between his gums, Ethan channeled his dying resolve, throwing his free hand forward and snatching the swaying carabiner from midair. Snap! The carabiner locked firmly onto the heavy cuff of Ethan's expedition jacket. In that exact instant, the ancient banyan vine snapped clean under the structural stress and rot. Ethan fell freely for a split second before the paracord snapped taut with a terrifying, high-pitched creak. The sudden, violent shockwave nearly dragged all three anchors over the cliff's edge. "Pull!" Heaved together, Maya screamed, the palms of her hands tearing raw and bloody against the coarse nylon. Chloe threw her entire body weight backward, gritting her teeth alongside Leo as they hauled the line inch by agonizing inch. Ethan's battered body rose slowly from the bottomless void, but from the sheer rock face below, the grotesque shadows refused to surrender their prize. Driving their black talons directly into solid granite, they scaled the vertical wall with terrifying speed, snapping their bottomless jaws and shrieking for blood. One phantom lunged upward, its withered, leathery claws locking onto the heel of Ethan's boot. The sudden deadweight doubled the load. The strained cord began grating violently across the sharp rock edge, fraying strand by strand. "Kick it off, Ethan, the rope is giving out," Leo roared in sheer desperation, the muscles in his arms bulging to the brink of tearing. Ethan doubled over in midair, drawing a small survival knife from his waist and plunging the steel straight through the phantom hand clutching his boot. The blade bit deep, unleashing a hissing burst of black bile that dissolved the undead flesh. The creature let out an ear-piercing shriek before peeling away and tumbling into the endless abyss below. Seizing that fleeting momentum, Leo, Maya, and Chloe summoned their last ounce of adrenaline, heaving violently to drag Ethan rolling onto the solid stone ledge. The fraying line snapped completely the second his boots crossed the threshold. All four collapsed onto the jagged stone, chests heaving in suffocating terror. Yet there was not a single second of sanctuary. The centipede bite on Ethan's hand had ballooned into a sickening, purplish ulcer, exuding a pungent, unnatural stench. Above them at the top of the ridge, dense crimson fog began cascading down the rock face, parting to reveal a colossal skull-shaped stone archway burrowing straight through the mountain peak, the sole remaining passage to the opposite shore of the island. Dense crimson mist descended over the mountain ridge like a shroud soaked in congealed blood. The beam from Leo's lantern refracted against the swirling fog into faint, ghostly halos, reducing their field of vision to less than 2 meters. The pungent stench of iron rust and scorched flesh struck their nostrils violently, overpowering the natural salinity of the tropical sea breeze. The monolithic stone gateway towered directly ahead. It was a massive limestone formation meticulously carved into the shape of a grotesque human skull. 2 cavernous eye sockets plunged into pitch-black voids like bottomless wells, its gaping maw forming a subterranean tunnel piercing straight into the mountain's core. Carved across the forehead of the stone skull were dense cuneiform sigils pulsing with rhythmic crimson light, mimicking the heartbeat of a malevolent entity trapped beneath cold marble. "Do we really have to go through there?" Maya asked through chattering teeth, clinging tightly to Chloe's arm for sanity. "There is no going back." Leo glanced over his shoulder at the crumbling cliff edge. The mournful shrieks of the horde below echoed upward relentlessly, signaling that the entities were scaling alternate fissures to reach the summit. Ethan heaved ragged breaths, leaning heavily on Leo's shoulder. The crimson centipede bite on his hand had turned as black as charred wood, venomous purple veins spider-webbed aggressively up toward his bicep. Beads of cold sweat drenched his forehead, his sclera laced with ruptured red capillaries. "Move, hurry, I can't hold out much longer," Ethan rasped, his voice scraping like rusted iron. Chloe stepped forward, lightly brushing her fingertips against the stone frame of the archway. The instant skin made contact with the freezing rock. A psychic shockwave surged up her spine, racking her body with a violent shudder. Her eyes widened, her breathing turning shallow and fast. This gate was built to seal something away, but decades ago. The islanders shattered the seal with a blood ritual. Inside this peak dwells the first cursed soul. Swallowing their dread, the 4 supported each other and stepped across the threshold of the stone maw. The second Maya's back foot cleared the entrance. A deafening thud vibrated through the bedrock behind them. A massive stone slab dropped from the ceiling of the archway, permanently sealing their only escape route. Absolute pitch black swallowed the corridor, the trapped atmosphere growing thick and suffocating like a tomb sealed centuries ago. The light from Leo's lantern flickered erratically before fading to a dull glow. Without warning, dozens of sconces mounted along the cavern walls erupted into cold, heatless blue flames. Under the spectral illumination, the 4 froze in horror as the true nature of the corridor was revealed. Lining both walls were thousands of terracotta human statues standing in rigid formation. Most horrific of all, the clay eyes of every single statue had been hollowed out, replaced with real, mummified human eyes that suddenly snapped into motion, swiveling in unison to stare directly at the 4 intruders trespassing within the forbidden sanctum. Thousands of desiccated human eyes embedded within the terracotta statues began to spasm violently. They rolled in their clay sockets with sickening, rasping scrapes before locking their milky, blood-rimmed stares squarely onto the 4 survivors. The temperature within the stone corridor plummeted so drastically that the sweat on Maya's brow instantly froze into fine frost. A dissonant chorus of rhythmic whispers resonated from the statues. Their clay lips did not part. Yet the spectral voices echoed directly inside the minds of the group, layers upon layers of agonizing curses, mournful laments, and bottomless despair. "They are feeding on our terror." Chloe clutched her temples, her face twisting in psychic agony. "Don't look into their eyes. Keep your eyes shut or stare at the ground and move. How can we run blind in a pitch-black tunnel?" Leo yelled in rising panic. He aimed his lantern ahead, but the spectral blue flames dancing on the walls seemed to swallow the artificial beam, plunging the hallway into a shifting labyrinth of shadows. Ethan bit down hard on his inner cheek to cling to consciousness. The centipede venom had completely paralyzed his upper torso. His right arm had swollen into a blackened, purplish mass twice its natural size. He suddenly noticed a grotesque anomaly. the terracotta statues were not stationary. Every time someone blinked or the lantern beam darted away, the statues crept an inch closer. The heavy ceramic heels stepped across the granite floor with slow, deliberate thuds. "Leo, Maya, they're moving," Ethan rasped through clenched teeth. "Sprint, do not stop." The four bolted forward along the endless, claustrophobic passage. The heavy thuds behind them instantly accelerated into a frenzied stampede, echoing like a petrified army charging after prey. Elongated clay arms thrust outward from the darkness, their jagged edges scraping over jackets and slicing through strands of hair. Anchoring the rear, Maya tripped over a shattered piece of pottery, slamming hard onto the freezing rock floor. Leo's lantern slipped from his grasp, clattering into a shadowed alcove. In an instant, dozens of statues lunged downward, their expressionless clay visages opening bleeding eyes as stone-hard fingers clamped tightly around Maya's ankles. "Help me, they've got me," Maya screamed in raw despair as her body was dragged backward into the suffocating darkness of the corridor. The screech of clay talons grinding against granite mingled with Maya's desperate wails. Vibrating violently through the suffocating corridor, her body was dragged several meters backward, her clothing tearing to shreds against the sharp shale gravel. The fired ceramic fingers clamped down like iron vices, forcing sickening creaks from the bones in her ankles. Leo spun around in an instant, unholstering a bent utility pry bar from his battered pack and lunging straight at the cluster of statues. Channeling every ounce of adrenaline, he brought the heavy steel down across the elbow joint of the statue anchoring Maya's leg. Crash! The ceramic arm shattered into 100 fragments, spraying a violent plume of red clay dust and centuries-old curdled blood. The effigy let out a guttural shriek, its desiccated eye sockets flaring with unholy rage as it swung its remaining arm toward Leo's throat. Ethan threw his unparalyzed side forward, using his entire momentum to shoulder-check the figure, sending it crashing to the stone floor where it pulverized on impact. Chloe gripped Maya beneath her arms, hauling her upright with desperate strength. The four did not pause for a single breath, sprinting headlong toward the end of the passage where the pale blue flames receded before a breathtakingly vast cavern. They burst through the tunnel mouth, tumbling down a steep rock slope. Before them lay a colossal subterranean abyss carved directly beneath the volcano's roots. At the core of the cavern stretched a massive, bubbling reservoir filled with thick, crimson fluid that steamed like an enormous vat of boiling blood. The suffocating copper stench and oppressive heat gripped their lungs, scorching their airways with every ragged breath. Rising from the churning crimson surface were dozens of black basalt pillars, forming a treacherous zigzagging path that led toward an ancient sacrificial dais isolated in the dead center of the lake. Suspended above the dais hovered a monolithic sarcophagus carved from obsidian jade, bound tightly by 9 colossal iron chains anchored directly into the surrounding cavern walls. From the depths of the boiling reservoir, deep, rhythmic respirations caused the viscous surface to heave violently. Crimson swells lapped against the stone ledge where the four stood, washing ashore dozens of bleached human craniums bobbing in the mire. Without warning, distinct raps resonated from inside the obsidian sarcophagus. Knock, knock, knock. The massive jade lid slid sideways with a grating shriek, revealing a withered, elongated hand tipped with pitch-black claws slowly emerging from the depths of the netherworld. Fan 15. Thuk the Thuk Tin. Ban te ko quat voi nung mong duo den tuyen bam chat le mep chiek quan tai nok bitch. Tung duong gon den noi com tren lop da zam exit nu vo ke muk. Bok len nung lan koi tim mo ao meng mui tu kieng go not. Chin soi zich sat kong lo kang kung fat ra nung tieng rang rang choi tai. Ri se va bui da roi la ta zong mat bimao soi sung suk ben doi. Tu trong ko quan tai. Mo than hin sao lon di thuong tu tu nagoi day. Sin bat I koak tren min bo chien jop ko shua da ri se va muk nat. Kon mat jiao sao chiek mat na dong hin do lao kai kwe. Kai ko doi mat sao hai khe ho mat na la ruk sang len hai non lua du quach nu dung nham dang soy. No chin la vi tu lin ko shua kua hun dao. K dahin te ton bo bo tak ba chin ban than min cho kai du dad duok su bat tu ta ak. No nagua ko len tran hang. Fat ra mo tiang gam chan thin dong dia. Song im kuk man doi thang vao long nuk bon noi. Kian mang ni ho she mao tui. Ka bon noi dong lot na kai zong them da dok dung. Mat ho mao de song gun gun. Nung bo zong noi doi de ho bat do troi len mat nuk. Ket noi lai voi nha u ton nung dan tui ki zong trang ngoi len bam kin kak ka da den. Chung ta kong the do lai no. Leo om chat hai tai dang ri mao. Jiong run ray trong con tuyet bong kung ka. No la chua te kua hun dao ne. Nin sang bo ben kia kia. Chloe kai te kwa lan koi dot. Obo doi din kua ho mao. Mo khe nut tu nien tren bacha nui dang mo ra. Tu duko the nin thay bao troi dem de sao ba nghe ro tiang song bien thuk su y koi xa. Du la loi thog dui nyat dan ra bo bien fia dong kua dao do lao. Phi vuo qua kak ka da de sang bo ben kia. Ethan guang de. Kan rang nen con do buat thou zong. An rut kao sung ban de duku ho con kap con lai trong tui trang bai. Thuk the ta ak tren bi tho nok bitch tu ki chiik mat na kai ve fia bon noi. No geo gun te mang mong vuo den len. Kai thang vao nam ban. Nge lap tu. Mat bi mau bung no. Hang chuk con tui ki zong trang tu doi chat long du quach lao vut len kong trung. Phong thang ve fia them da noi ho dang dung voi ham rang lam chom sak non. Shay len kak ka da. Nyan len, Ethan te lon, de leo. Maya va Chloe lao ve fia ka da den do tien ngay truak ki ve ki vat zong train ap zong nian nat bo da sao lung. Part 15. The entity awakens. The withered hand tip with pitch black claws clamped down hard against the rim of the obsidian sarcophagus. Prominent black veins bulged beneath leathery gray skin resembling rotting bark. Exuding wisps of violet mist laden with suffocating decay. The 9 colossal iron chains snapped taut with ear-splitting, metallic screeches, raining flakes of rust and pulverized stone into the boiling reservoir of blood below. From within the jade tomb, an unnaturally towering figure slowly rose to a sitting posture. The entity was clad in ancient, corroded ceremonial armor. Its face was obscured behind a bronze mask carved into the likeness of a snarling demon skull. Behind the hollow eye slits burned 2 malevolent embers, glowing like churning molten lava. This was the ancient chieftain of the island, the one who had sacrificed his entire tribe and his own soul to dark forces in exchange for eternal, unholy life. The entity tilted its head toward the cavern roof and unleashed an earth-shattering roar. The violent acoustic shockwave slammed directly into the chests of the 4 survivors, rupturing their eardrums and sending warm blood trickling down their necks as they collapsed onto the steep rock incline. The blood lake churned in violent tempest. Submerged human remains rose to the surface, assembling into skeletal aquatic abominations that clung to the basalt pillars. "We can't fight this thing." Leo clutched his bleeding ears, his voice cracking in absolute hopelessness. "It's the sovereign of this island. Look across the lake." Chloe pointed through the swirling toxic fumes. On the far shore of the Crimson Reservoir, a natural fracture in the Caldera wall split open, revealing a patch of starlit night sky and the distinct rhythm of actual ocean breakers outside. It was the sole exit leading to the eastern coastline of Skull Island. "We have to jump the pillars to reach the other side." Ethan forced himself up, grinding his teeth against the searing agony in his limbs. He unholstered the emergency line launcher remaining in his tactical harness. The malevolent lord on the jade altar slowly turned its demonic mask toward the 4 intruders. Raising a black clawed arm, it pointed directly at them. Instantly, the blood lake detonated. Dozens of skeletal abominations burst from the churning crimson mire, leaping through the air with rows of jagged fangs aimed straight at their perch. "Onto the pillars. Go!" Ethan roared, shoving Leo, Maya, and Chloe onto the first basalt column just as the skeletal swarm slammed down to obliterate the stone ledge behind them. The wet, blood-slick surfaces of the black basalt pillars were as treacherous as grease. Every frantic stride sent splatters of boiling crimson fluid flying, hissing and scorching through the heavy canvas of their expedition boots. Beneath them, the blood reservoir churned violently, burping colossal noxious bubbles that burst with sickening shrieks, releasing plumes of eye-searing, toxic vapor into the suffocating cavern. Leo took the lead, gripping Maya's hand tightly as they leapt across the jagged, protruding stone heads. Skeletal abominations crawled relentlessly up the flanks of the basalt pillars, snapping their needle-like claws to snag the boots of anyone who slipped toward the scalding mire. Biting through the searing pain in her mangled ankle, Maya channeled every ounce of agility to keep her footing on surfaces barely wide enough for 2 boots. Ethan and Chloe brought up the rear. The necrotic centipede venom had completely blackened Ethan's arm, creeping into his shoulder and leaving his upper torso half paralyzed. Clinging to consciousness, he gripped the emergency line launcher with his left hand, scanning frantically for skeletal fiends scaling the pillars around them. Upon the elevated dais, the bronze-masked lord rose to his full, unnatural height inside the obsidian sarcophagus, standing well over 8 feet tall. His twisted frame was clad in ancient armor choked with mold and centuries of rust. Raising skeletal arms to the vaulted cavern ceiling, he unleashed a guttural incantation in an archaic tongue that violently tore at their eardrums. The 9 colossal iron chains binding the tomb shuddered violently, grinding against their anchor points and casting off showers of crimson sparks. Without warning, a massive iron link sheared away from the cavern wall. The whip-like chain swept horizontally through the air like a colossal steel flail, hurtling straight toward Chloe and Ethan. "Chloe, get down!" Ethan roared, hurling himself forward to flatten Chloe onto the basalt landing. Crash! The massive iron tip pulverized the stone pillar directly behind Ethan, detonating the rock into a spray of razor-sharp shrapnel that dug into his back and shoulders. The catastrophic impact fractured Ethan's pillar into jagged shards, tilting it violently as it began sinking into the scalding blood mire below. The fractured pillar collapsed into the lake of blood, dragging Ethan's sliding frame down toward the scalding mire. Boiling droplets splashed onto his neck, blistering the skin and filling the air with the stench of singed flesh. In that razor-thin instant between life and death, Chloe flattened herself against the adjacent ledge, leaning far over the precipice to lock both hands around Ethan's collar. "Hold on to me, Ethan, Leo, Maya, help him," Chloe screamed, her face flushed crimson under extreme exertion, her fingernails tearing raw as she gripped the heavy canvas. Leo and Maya scrambled back to the edge of the adjoining stone. Leo wedged his boots into a narrow rock fissure, anchoring Chloe by her waist belt while Maya extended the metal baseball bat downward for Ethan to grasp. In a final, unified surge of sheer adrenaline, the 3 heaved violently, wrenching Ethan upward just as the stone pillar sank completely beneath the boiling red tide. The violent momentum sent all 4 tumbling onto the penultimate basalt platform, mere meters away from the cliffside fissure leading outside. Yet the bronze-masked lord had no intention of releasing his quarry. Seeing the flailing chains miss their mark, the entity stepped fully out of the obsidian sarcophagus. Its massive feet strode across the surface of the boiling blood without sinking. The scalding fluid instantly crystallized into jagged sheets of black ice beneath each unnatural stride. Behind the grotesque bronze visage, the archaic chanting twisted into a shrill, mocking laughter that shook the subterranean foundations. Hundreds of skeletal abominations burst from the lakebed, swarming the narrow exit to form an impenetrable wall of bone and noxious violet vapor. The 4 were completely boxed in. Ethan looked down at the emergency line launcher in his hand, then locked his gaze onto the advancing bronze mask. The launcher's heavy grappling hook was forged from reinforced titanium alloy, anchored to an ultra-thin braided steel cable. "Leo, get ready to haul the cable," Ethan rasped through ragged breaths. "What are you doing?" Leo stared in horror at his friend. "I'm bringing down its seal." Summoning the last vestige of his physical strength, Ethan raised the launcher with his uninjured left arm, aiming the crosshairs squarely at the fiery eye slit burning behind the ancient chieftain's bronze mask. Snap! Bang! The titanium grapple pierced the air, slamming directly through the bronze eye slit and embedding itself deep into the desiccated cranium of the malevolent sovereign. A thick jet of corrosive black bile erupted from the puncture, accompanied by an agonizing, world-ending shriek from the entity. The sovereign's agonizing roar reverberated through the vaulted cavern, shearing colossal stalactites from the ceiling and sending them crashing into the seething lake of blood. Thick, tar-like black bile flooded through the mosque's eye slit, releasing acrid gray fumes that dissolved centuries-old bronze. The monolithic entity staggered across the black ice, its jagged talons clawing frantically to wrench the titanium grapple anchored deep within its cranium. "Leo, loop the cable around that rock spur. Do it now," Ethan roared amidst the chaos, tossing the launcher assembly to his companion. Leo did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. Catching the rig, he hauled the braided steel cable taut and whipped it 3 times around a jagged basalt pillar rooted into the bedrock. The steel cable stretched rigid like a tuned string, emitting terrifying, high-pitched stretches as the monstrous titan wrenched backward in frenzied agony. The immense tension cracked the basalt anchor, yet the deep-set titanium hook wrenched the creature's skull violently sideways, dislocating the ancient neck vertebrae. Under the brutal leverage, the bronze mask pried halfway off, exposing the grotesque truth beneath, a desiccated, skinless skull laced with writhing, worm-like black vessels and elongated fangs locked in an unnatural underbite. The moment the mask dislodged, the malevolent link binding the skeletal horde severed. Hundreds of abominations guarding the cavern mouth collapsed instantly into piles of lifeless bone splinters across the stone. The passage to the open sea stood bare. "Run! To the ocean!" Maya screamed, shouldering Ethan's uninjured side. Chloe immediately anchored the other, together hauling their failing leader toward the fracture in the cliffside. Leo released the launcher rig, sprinting hard to follow the group. Yet just as his boots crossed the threshold toward the outside world, a pitch-black, clawed arm burst through the toxic fumes, clamping tightly onto the hem of his expedition jacket and violently yanking him backward. The ancient abomination had fractured its own cranium to slip the hook. Dragging its broken, bile-soaked form forward, it parted its bottomless jaws, hissing a final, suffocating death curse. "Your souls belong forever to Skull Island." The unnatural force jerked Leo backward toward the precipice. His collar choked him violently. His boots skidded across the slick shale toward the monstrous sovereign crawling through the toxic shroud. The elongated fangs of the island's lord snapped mere inches from his throat, exhaling the nauseating stench of thousands of buried dead. "Shed the jacket, Leo! Strip the jacket off!" Ethan screamed desperately. Snapping out of his terror, Leo wrenched open the front zipper and tore his arms free. The sudden loss of tension left the demon clutching an empty shell, which was instantly shredded into smoking, blackened rags by its talons. Seizing the split second, Leo threw himself sideways, scrambled to his feet, and bolted through the jagged fissure. The 4 burst out of the suffocating subterranean tomb into the raw, salty sea wind of the tropical night. Before them stretched a gentle rocky slope leading down to the eastern shores of Skull Island. A sweep of pristine white sand lay illuminated beneath the moonlight, and far down at the water's edge, their small chartered speedboat was still anchored, bobbing gently upon the rhythmic ocean swells. "The boat is still there. Run!" Maya wept in relief, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime, mud, and ash caked onto her cheeks. Yet the island had no intention of yielding its prey. A cataclysmic tremor ripped through the earth, shaking the entire landmass to its core. From the volcanic caldera behind them, deafening detonations shook the bedrock. The colossal skull-shaped stone summit fractured and collapsed in massive avalanches, unleashing a colossal spiral of pitch-black smoke that rose into the heavens, completely swallowing the full moon. Across the ocean surface, the pristine turquoise waters of the morning blackened into stagnant ink. Hundreds of submerged spectral silhouettes surfaced from the deep, stretching out pale, waterlogged arms and churning through the surf straight toward the boat to sever their final hope of salvation. With no options left, Ethan, Leo, Chloe, and Maya summoned their last reserves of fading life, sprinting down the rocky incline, tearing across the wet sand, and plunging into the freezing, blackened tide to haul themselves over the hull of the boat. The pitch-black sea felt as cuttingly cold as glacial ice against their skin, numbing them straight to the marrow. Dozens of pale, waterlogged arms breached the surface, freezing claws dug into their legs, dragging them violently down toward the abyss. Ethan summoned the dying remnants of strength in his uninjured leg to kick a bloated, floating face beneath the surface, shoving Maya and Chloe over the boat's gunwale first. Leo scrambled onto the deck, his raw, bleeding hands hauling Ethan aboard mere seconds before a massive underwater silhouette rose to swallow him whole. Leo lunged straight into the cockpit, turned the spare ignition key, and engaged the throttle. The outboard engine roared, tearing through the suffocating gloom. The spinning propeller whipped up a violent spray of black brine mingled with the curdled residue of clinging phantoms. The boat surged over the swells, shattering the spectral perimeter and hurtling out toward the open ocean. Behind them, Skull Island was swallowed by infernal smoke and dense crimson mist. The monolithic skull karst split clean down the center and collapsed into the ocean trenches, generating a localized surge that propelled the small vessel further into open water. The agonizing, vengeful wails of the ancient entity echoed across the vast sea before fading into the morning breeze. As the first golden rays of the summer dawn pierced the horizon, dissolving the trailing black fog, the four friends lay collapsed across the deck, utterly shattered and drenched. The rhythmic, gentle lap of the tropical ocean against the hull felt unnervingly peaceful, as though the nightmare had never occurred. Chloe leaned against the stern, her hollow gaze lost in the distance. Maya clutched her bandaged ankle, weeping uncontrollably in sheer relief that her lungs still drew living air. Leo stared down at his ruined video camera. The internal memory cards had been charred into brittle cinder. Ethan lay motionless on his back, breathing shallowly beneath the pale blue sky. The venomous centipede bite on his hand had stopped bleeding, yet the surrounding tissue had hardened into a grotesque, blackened scar, coiled permanently into the likeness of a minute skull branded deep into his flesh. And beneath the tranquil lullaby of the ocean waves guiding their exhausted slumber, a faint, soul-freezing whisper resonated from the deepest corners of Ethan's subconscious. "You may leave the island, but the island shall never leave you." And so, the morning sun breaks gently over the open sea, washing away the lingering shadows of the night. The nightmare on Skull Island may have come to an end, but some echoes never truly fade. They linger in the quiet crevices of our minds. Now, let the rhythmic rhythm of the ocean waves carry your thoughts into a deep, uninterrupted slumber. If this journey sent a gentle chill down your spine, please leave a like, subscribe, and share with those who wander the dark. Sleep well, rest your weary soul, and beware of what watches you from beyond the mirror. Until next time, sweet nightmares.